Hi, happy finals week, everybody. I just wanted to make a quick video explaining some of the research that I did for my lit review, give you a background on my topic, and yeah, hopefully it'll be somewhat entertaining. It's a conversation and a topic that's really important to me. So my lit review is titled "The Importance of Representing Fat Bodies in Television." Just as kind of a preamble to all of this, I wanted to cover a couple of topics, give you some definitions so that we're on the same page as far as an understanding of what we're looking at here. So first is representation, which I'm sure you have a pretty good idea of. So that's going to include any depictions or conversations or narratives that are going to surround people with different bodies. And specifically in this case with fat representation, that's going to include people who are larger than your average person. And kind of tied to that is this other idea that I wanted to explain. The word is going to be used a lot in my lit review of fat phobia. So fat phobia is a newer term. It's been developed over the last couple of years, probably the last 5 years. It's really become a part of a conversation of representation and bias. So fat phobia is going to be the inherent societal dislike, hatred, or prejudice against people in larger bodies, fat people, which I'm sure a lot of you have kind of a knee-jerk reaction to the word fat, and I just want to encourage you to shy away from that, recognize that it is what it is, and it's okay. And with those things out of the way, I'll tell you a little bit more about my thesis. So basically with my research, I just wanted to cover a couple of ideas. So first, establishing the idea that representation matters, that there's a positive impact that comes from being represented. And we've seen a little bit of this over the last couple of years if you think about what's becoming popular and accepted and just the variety, even in I don't know, something as general as Disney movies in the last 10 years, and the way in which we have changed what variety of stories we're willing to tell and the variety of stories that we're willing to consume. So once I had established that representation mattered, made a difference, then we moved on to, okay, so what is the current representation of these fat bodies? What does that look like? What are the examples? And those were attacked with both a positive set of examples and a negative set of examples, which I'll cover here in a minute. And then the final thing is, if representation matters and if fat people are currently being represented in a mostly negative way, in a mostly villainizing way, then what can we do to fix that? And what would be the benefits? Where is our motivation to make those better and to grow in that way? So my thesis is that because fat phobia has been an ingrained part of Western culture for centuries, the negative narrative surrounding large bodies is a common thread in media. So with my research, I was aiming to prove the importance of representation in television, like I mentioned, by establishing the current realities of how fat people are portrayed, and support the conclusion that if positive representation makes a beneficial impact, then it bears social importance that fat people be positively and honestly represented in television. The next section of my paper is covering a brief history of fat phobia, which I've covered a little bit of with you today. It does make the important point that fat phobia does tend to be more harsh in situations with Black bodies, which is super not great. There's also some religious superiority that's coming up. The idea that thinness and meekness are all combined in one, this idea of virtue and being able to monitor and control other people's virtue. So then moving on from that, we have a little bit of an analysis of modern fat phobia, how that's changed over the last couple of years, comparing the differences between the 50s and the 70s and the 90s and then today. And just some alternatives to the traditional understanding of what obesity is and this obesity epidemic that America has been facing for the last couple of years. Which the general consensus on that is that the BMI, which is used to determine if a person is obese, is actually outdated and inaccurate, which is interesting, but not the point of my research, but just so you know where we're standing with that. So then, of course, that moves on to the impact of representation, why representation matters. There's a great quote here that I wanted to share from Manarini, who is an ethicist. It's a hard word to say. It says, collective forms of socially constructed knowledge make sense of the reality and provide a practical guide to people in everyday life. So basically, the narratives that we are presented with, the representation that we see in our day-to-day life is going to determine how we act in our everyday life. So because, for example, something that we all can relate to, The Office. Everyone's familiar with The Office. Everyone knows that Michael Scott loves his That's What She Said jokes. And we can see that as that was established as a funny, popular joke, in our lives, we saw a consequential, everyone's making that joke. Same kind of idea. Another example from my personal life, my grandparents have been watching Schitt's Creek. They're very traditional. We were shocked that they were watching it at all. I don't know if you're familiar. Hopefully you are. It's a wonderful show. All the seasons are on Netflix now. But as Grandpa got accustomed to Dan Levy's character, David, on Schitt's Creek, he was more understanding and accepting of other representations of gay people, watched an episode of Queer Eye, felt like he understood. So it's important. It matters, and it's the way that we can make sense of our world and the diversity that exists there in a non-threatening area, if that makes sense. So moving on, I'm sure everyone is pretty much aware of what the positive and negative representations of fat bodies are. Obviously, there's going to be a lot more negative ones. In my paper, I cover examples from a couple different shows just to highlight a few: Golden Girls, Friends, King of Queens, Will and Grace, Family Guy, Saturday Night Live, The Tonight Show, where generally the finding was male characters are 3 times more likely to engage in fat commentary than female characters, and also that the majority of fat-specific material was verbal as opposed to nonverbal, so that these characters are going out of their way to establish this negative narrative. Moving forward, there has been a bit of a growth in getting rid of the inherent goodness or badness of bodies. And modern doctors are currently shifting their focus from treating the obesity epidemic to instead promoting something we like to call health at every size, and just teaching people in society that it is okay to be happy with how you currently are and that you deserve to feel safe and loved and healthy and valued. And based on all my research, representation is going to be a huge step forward in making that possible for people. So that is kind of a large overview of representation and fat phobia and improving representation for people. Hopefully you now feel a little more equipped to be aware of the media you're consuming, seeing what the differences are in the bodies that you're observing and what your gut reactions are and how you feel about those people. And ultimately, I would just love if everyone took away from this research that we're all just people and we're trying our best with what we have, and you are never in a position to make any decisions about anyone but yourself. Thanks for a great semester. Hope you guys have a good break and a happy Christmas. Bye.